Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Kaleidoscope HQ, and particularly welcome to Network Fest. This is our first of 5 webinars all this week. We're really pleased to have you with us. The whole point of Network Fest is about bringing together all that is great happening in networks all around the world and to share practical tips and tricks. So this is, as you'll have found out if you watched our little intro video, as much about you there, wherever you are, as it is about us here. So we really want you to get involved, and we really appreciate you making your time to join us. My name is Richard Taunt. I'm going to be chairing today.
Hi there, my name is Anna Howell.
And I'm Danny Ryan.
Anna, how can people get involved today?
Yep, so there's 2 ways you can join the conversation. Please either use Twitter using the hashtag NetworkFest. Our Twitter handle is @kscopehealth, or feel free to email questions via admin@kaleidoscope.healthcare. And it should say all that in the chat box. And just to add that we'll be recording the webinar today, and we'll be sharing it around afterwards.
Excellent, great. Danny, what are we talking about today?
So, well, welcome to Network Fest, the Network Fest's first webinar. I'm so excited I've actually lost my voice. We're going to be running daily webinars with practical tips and tricks on how to run your network, ranging from maintaining enthusiasm to how to stop fizzle out of your network. So the topic for today is, do all networks need to be managed? The self-sustaining network, truth or myth? We're delighted to have with us today Dr. Lisa Ishii from Johns Hopkins and Dr. Suzette Woodward, the director of the Sign Up to Safety campaign. That was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Well, so we made it. Made it.
So, Rich, why are we taking this topic first?
Danny, great question. So at Kaleidoscope, we're really interested in how you can get networks to be most effective. And it's certainly a common perception we've come up against is people thinking networks are sort of fairly easy, things you can do in your spare time, where some of what we've experienced is that it's not quite like that. So today's discussion hopefully will get into some of those boundary issues between how much structure you need versus how much you just let it go. So I think we're going to have a great discussion.
Yeah. Should we get started?
Let's get started. I should say first off that because this is our first Network Fest webinar, we did think about dressing up in black tie for today, but then we thought we might not. But we're presuming you're sitting at home doing just the same, being as excited about Network Fest as we are. So we will kick off. So I think we're going to go to Lisa first. Lisa, we've given you a huge amount of time, as in about 3.5, 4 minutes, in which to sort of say who you are, what your background is, and your take on our question for today about whether networks need to be managed. So we'll go to Lisa, we'll go to Suzette, and then we'll go to discussion. And I think if people want to just be plugging in questions, comments as we go, that's great, and we'll come to them in just a moment. Anna, what have we forgotten?
I think that's everything.
Danny,
yeah,
good?
I think we should go to Lisa.
Lisa, good morning, first of all. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Okay, it's 7:03, so I'll try to end by 7:06. I am speaking to you from Baltimore, Maryland today. I practice at Johns Hopkins in the School of Medicine. I'm the Chief Quality Officer for Clinical Best Practices and the Senior Medical Director for Clinical Integration. And in those dual roles, what I've gotten to focus a lot of effort and energy into is the development and maintenance of our clinical communities. I had the great opportunity to give a webinar on clinical communities with Mary Dixon Woods in the spring, which hopefully many of the audience members are familiar with. But just very briefly, clinical communities are self-governing clinical networks of stakeholders who come together to focus on quality improvement projects. For us, they are teams with participants from across our health system. We have a 6-hospital health system with other entities as well, including primary care groups, ambulatory surgery centers, a home care group. So when we take on a clinical quality improvement project, we bring all the stakeholders from across each of the entities together to the table in a clinical community. We have 23 active clinical communities at the time. To the point about management. So it sort of depends on what you mean. So we enjoy letting them drive the conversation we provide project management to help with the practical matters of scheduling materials, keeping them on focus, keeping them on their A3s, etc. But generally speaking, management with regards to direction for the team is quite limited. We really are there centrally. We have a project management office that provides the vertical infrastructure to support their work. The entire intent is for them to be self-governing and really, again, to be driving the quality improvement value conversation on their own. So management in the sense of project management, we provide, and that is very strong. But with regards to management of their work or their vision, very little. That's really up to them. Okay, it's 7:06. I'll stop.
Lisa, that is amazing. I don't know about anyone at home, but for me, at 7:06 in the morning, I can barely string 2 words together, let alone 3 minutes of articulate description of the network. Lisa, thank you so much. And that point about the balance between direction and sort of infrastructure support, a really interesting one, which I'm sure we'll come back to in the discussion. Suzette, over to you. Welcome.
Hi, guys. So I'm going to keep it brief. I'm the director for a national campaign called Sign Up Safety. We started with quite a traditional approach, which was kind of helping people reduce avoidable harm, and then quickly realized that that's not what was needed. That actually what was needed was the way in which we could try and help connect people together, develop relationships, and actually help them talk to each other. And so obviously networks is one amazing way in which you can do that. The topic here is very dear to my heart because I've seen many, many networks set up or be set up and actually fail. And it's crucial that we need to understand, why do they fail? Why is it that they don't kind of keep going or are sustained to keep going? And I think that we actually know quite a lot of that, and it's important that everyone kind of gets to learn those tips and tools about keeping your network going, because it is the way forward in terms of developing the connections that we think are so vital to create those relationships that could actually make a really big difference in our health service. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today.
Excellent. So, Lisa, very succinct, very nice. Thank you very much. Really opened up the discussion perfectly. Sue, I think probably just as a disclaimer, all of these networks which you've seen set up and fail, these haven't all been your networks. It's not like you're a network of a failure.
No, they've been, over the last 20 or so years, I've attended them, I've tried to organise some of them, I've seen other people try to organise them, so you name it, any different way of trying to create a network or make it work. I have seen some work, so hopefully we'll be building on the successes just as much as the lessons from the failures.
Excellent. Suzette, Lisa, thank you very much for the introductions. Again, just to say, we want your questions, we want your comments, your experiences. Anna, how can people get involved?
Yep, so 2 ways, either via Twitter using the hashtag NetworkFest at Kscope Health, or via our email address, admin@kaleidoscope.healthcare.
Or on the chat, if they want to come on the chat?
Yes, or on the chat as well. Good reminder.
Excellent.
Use the chat box.
Great stuff. Well, I think whilst questions are going to come in, if I might just start off, if that's okay, Susan, Lisa. So I've got one, and then possibly I'll pass to Diane. But please do send in your comments. And so, firstly, just to Lisa, really interested that. So you've got 23 of these communities. How much has your approach changed over time in terms of that balance between not over-directing, but making sure that they have the support to keep them going? Has it remained quite constant, or have you had to change that balance over time?
You know, amazingly enough, it hasn't changed much. We've been building these teams over the last 5 years, and it's a model that seems to work. And again, I'll note that 5 years ago is when Mary Dixon Woods published her piece with Peter Pronovost describing Clinical Communities model, and we have been able to build on that model. I guess I'll say what has changed is that we have formalized the process more. The original teams we brought them together in a relatively loose way. Because the work has grown and because the number of teams have grown, we have established more formal protocols, and we've also worked much more diligently to bring the individual teams together so that they're an even larger network that can support peer learning and sharing of best practices. So the general idea that we are there to support them but let them lead the change has not changed. What has changed is more formal processes around, we're much more formal and diligent with lean interventions. For example, all of our teams have a charter. They update their charter on an annual basis. We were less rigorous about that, if you will, in the beginning. We are much more diligent about accountability and reporting to our Patient Safety and Quality Committee of the Board of Trustees, so that the concepts have remained the same, but there is more structure in place than there was previously. The process of selecting our leads, et cetera. Our data dashboards are more formal now, so I guess it has just, we have formalized the original processes.
Lisa, thank you very much. And so turning to Suze, I think that point about having structure in a network is something where I think we possibly struggle with a bit on this side of the Atlantic. But how do you manage it with Sign Up to Safety? As I've heard you talk before about how you're there to say thank you as much as to tell people what to do. So how do you balance giving people the sort of basic level of support but not over-directing?
So I think there are a large number of things you can do, and what some people might perceive as being highly organised is actually, in fact, sort of kind of subtly organised. And what I mean by that is that if you are going to bring people together, you need to, and you've mentioned this before, you need to be really clear about why you're bringing people together. What is that crucial purpose? What are you all wanting to share? What are you all wanting to talk about? And and be clear. So is it about learning? Is it about sharing? Is it about bringing people together, about good practice? Whatever it is, be very clear about that, because people's time is very precious. So that's number one. The other is to really prepare well, and by that, really think about what you want to achieve, and think about how you're inviting people, the language that you use, the tone and style that you use, that it's warm, inviting, that people genuinely realize that you care about their time, you care about their comfort, you care about their feelings, and in order to do that, you make sure that the venue is as comfortable as it can be, that people are fed and watered, that they have time to reflect and time to think, time to move around, time to have all of the usual comfort breaks. And these are little things that become really big, because if you bring people together, you rush them through, you shout at them, you give them a load of information and tell them to go off and make a difference. That's why they fail. So if you slow things down, you talk to people with respect and humility and curiosity and kindness, all those wonderful things, you're actually doing a massive amount of organising without actually saying, I'm organising you. And right. The final little bit I would say, though, is that you do need, in the beginning, I think, and I need to think about whether you need it in the long term, but you definitely need expert facilitation in the beginning. And that is somebody who isn't going to sit at the front and tell everyone how it is. It's somebody who nudges the room, who kind of prods people to ask the right questions or open out those that are silent in a really kind way. It's kind of so it's very, very skilled. And I think people I think that's another reason why networks can fail, is they misunderstand the expertise required to actually get it to work really well before you get to the point of sustaining it.
Lisa, thank you very much. I see we've got questions coming through, but I'm hogging all your questions.
Yeah.
Can I ask one more?
Yes,
doing
yes,
5
go for
presents a
it.
week.
Go
You
on
can sort
then.
of bounce it off.
So I can barely talk anyway.
Okay,
That's all right.
Let's come to questions just a sec. But Lisa, I saw you nodding vigorously when Suze was talking about the need for warmth and kindness. And I was just wondering, in terms of the structures you've got in place for clinical communities, if we were to read those sort of those structures and processes, would we see bits in there about trying to foster that sort of culture?
Absolutely. You actually just hit the nail on the head. Culture is incredibly important. Culture and trust. So we remind ourselves constantly that change progresses at the speed of trust. So to Suzette's point about the importance of a warm, welcoming environment, that's how you bring people together to build trust that enables them to understand that they can learn from each other and they can come to a common purpose together. I was also nodding my head at her point about the importance of making it crystal clear why people are coming together, that time is valuable. And that's why we have become much more deliberate about the original charter process, which we do in a facilitated manner, because she's spot on. If you are going to ask people to give up some of their precious time, it has to be crystal clear why they are doing so and what the end goal is. Because if you can't articulate that in a very granular way, then perhaps people really shouldn't be coming together. So several of the things that Suzette said really resonated, and that's how by making sure that we have those things in place, that's how we're able to achieve success in a sustainable way.
Excellent, great. Although Suze, you did miss out the essential ingredient, which Lisa listed a reference to something which has gone on here in the last week. You may not realise that if you get everyone chanting together, then that helps, doesn't it? Okay, great. Anna, questions on the text?
Yeah, definitely. So thanks everyone for your questions. So the themes coming through. One of the first questions, thank you, Kate. So a question for both speakers: is it possible to maintain the balance of management versus leadership in very large networks? And then the second theme is about failure. So Suze, do you have any comments on the extent to which the lessons learned in network failures are being learnt in the development of NHS-wide networks? And linking to that, a question on Twitter, Suzette, what were the themes of failure and had these networks been managed? So I think we'll start with those, if that's okay.
A lot in there. Okay, so Suze, do you want to start off then on failure and themes of failure? And then, Lisa, I wonder if you could pick up the question about managing that balance within very large networks, and is there an optimal scale? I think that's what
yes.
I'm good at. So Suze first on the happy topic of failure, and then Lisa on the large network front.
Okay. So Marshall Gans talks about this brilliantly. So if anyone wants to go and have a look at Marshall Gans when he talks about mobilization, energizing, more so towards creating communities of practice or communities to lead things like social change. Also the Obama Foundation, Obama says, I'm going to look at my screen because it's a nice quote, which is, real lasting change doesn't just happen on its own, it requires managing and organizing. So it fails if you leave everyone just to get on with it on their own. And it's what the reason why it fails is because what you have is some committed and excited and inspired individuals who get all of those distractions and pressures from their lives and their work, and so that erodes the ability to meet up. It erodes the ability to connect over time. And then because change does take time, that if you don't see instant success in today's world, you tend to think, well, what's the point? So not managing your time appropriately, again, back to the not having a clear purpose. And weirdly, what I've seen a lot, and this sounds odd, but is bringing the wrong people together. So I've often seen people say, right, everyone needs to meet because we need to learn about how to manage falls, for example. And you'll get the people who are completely passionate about falls in the room, and they'll learn from each other. But what you need is a wider group of people to start to make connections and relationships that make an even bigger difference, because otherwise those people go back and come up against the local barriers and challenges they face. And so if you haven't got the wider set of people in the room, the network is just a group of committed and interested people who come together, and that's not quite what you're trying to achieve in my mind. So the themes of failure are having the wrong people in the room, having the people in the room without any help, support, and just told to kind of get on with it, and not managing that appropriately so that people just go away thinking, well, we haven't achieved anything, what's the point? There's many more than that, but those kind of really stand out in my head.
Sue, thank you very much. So Lisa, coming back to the question about managing balance between direction and support with a large network, but also if you wanted to pick up anything Sue said.
Absolutely. So it's interesting. It absolutely is a balance between managing and letting the network or the networks within the network work autonomously on their own. I will say that there is an appreciation from the network for the structure and more importantly for the accountability piece. So we have found that the teams respond well to being held accountable. And in some ways, when we're talking about managing the teams, I almost think what we're talking about is holding them accountable. So making sure that they set goals and then demonstrate objectively that they are achieving their goals, or if they are not, why not? What are they doing to address that? So it's certainly a balance. Again, as I said from the start, they need to feel as though they are the drivers, but I think they also respond very nicely to having some structure as well as an expectation of accountability.
Lisa, really, really nicely put. And I think that's really interesting, that point around accountability and how you best make sure that people are delivering to what they're set out to do. Really nice point. Anna, how are we doing?
Yep, very well, thanks. So a linked question to your answer there, Lisa, on Twitter. So how in a traditional hierarchy model can we start to build nicety and remove the "this is how it is" mode? Just a good one.
Okay, let's go with that. Let's go with that, Lisa. So how moving from hierarchy to repeat the question one more time, Anna.
All right. How in a traditional hierarchy model can we start to build nicety and remove the "this is how it is" mode?
Okay. So moving from a too much direction to actually giving people the space. How is that something which you did when you first started introducing clinical communities, Lisa?
Right. So that's really the whole premise. The whole premise is, you need an organized management system, and what you need from the top of that hierarchy, if you will, from leadership, is the declaration of clear expectations. So it's okay for, in a hierarchical way, leadership says we expect the elimination of central line associated bloodstream infections. Then the teams are supported to identify the ways in which they are going to do that. So the hierarchy, if you will, it is important. It is important for setting the expectation clearly, and also clearly making sure that the teams are enabled to do the work that they need to do. So it's a continuous cycle. So I would say that there certainly is a role for the hierarchy, but the role is to set the expectation from the top and to make sure that the teams are resourced to reach that expectation. But then it's happening locally at the team level with regards to how they do so.
Great. Really, really nice points, Lisa. Thank you very much. Time is against us. We've got 5 minutes. Anna, so we've got questions. What are the themes coming through in the questions?
Yeah, so the things coming through on the chat box is, I guess, membership in the network. So how do you reach out to a variety of people to get that right balance in the room instead of just the interested people? And linked to that, is it necessary for all members of a network to be actively engaged in the network? Or is there a role for the lurker which can be utilised by the network in other ways?
And that point about engagement actually going to come back. When are we talking engagement, Annie?
Later on in the week, we'll find out at the end of the webinar.
Stay tuned. We're not going to tell you now. We're going to come back to it. So lovely. So getting that, any further points?
Just what types of funding mechanisms have you used to initiate or sustain networks? It's a slightly different track.
Good question.
Okay, lovely. Great.
Rich, can I come back on that hierarchy thing a little, just for like 1 minute? About time?
So I'm in charge here. This is a hierarchy. Hold on 1 second. Suze, do you want to come in on the hierarchy point?
Fabulous. Can I just say, hierarchy is created not just by power and status. Hierarchy can be created by the power in the room, as in who dominates it, the grandstanders, the people who think they know more than others. So the things that we think are really important are trying to get rid of sort of stereotypes and the way in which people see themselves. In terms of, so when people introduce themselves, they often do that whole, I'm Suzette Woodward and I'm this and this is my whole CV for about 10 minutes, when all they should do is just say, I'm Suzette, and you need to get to know the human being behind the name and not the title and all of those kind of things. You need to create that whole thing that we're all in it together, and that there isn't a dominance. Absolutely right for that person who said, is there a room for a lurker? Actually, the lurker very much speaks to, the blog that I did around introverts. May well be somebody who is making an amazing amount of difference by having conversations in their head and reflecting on what they're hearing, and they will then come out with something simply superb, possibly at the end. So the lurkers are not being lurkers, actually. They're just being part of the network, but they might not be having a voice. So you do need to help them have a voice in maybe different ways. You need to absolutely trust people to do what matters to them, because they really will. If they're happy, enjoying, they really will do what you actually want them to do. And that's the art of decentralizing and distributed leadership. So hierarchy is a really fascinating subject that I could go on for hours.
Excellent. Coming to a conference hall near you, Suzette Woodward's 5-day on hierarchy. I look forward to that. We're really tight on time. So Lisa, I'll turn to you possibly just on that question we had about ensuring you get the right mix of people. It sounds like something you've done really well, clinical communities. So Lisa, you've got about a minute about how to get all of those right people in the room.
Right. So I haven't mentioned that each team typically has 2 physician leads, and we look to our leads quite a bit to help us identify all the correct stakeholders. The teams are multidisciplinary teams, and they are really the ones who know who the participants are that make a difference for them, whether it's social workers or case managers or pharmacists or physical therapists or physicians or nurses, etc. So we try to be as inclusive as possible. The more the merrier. Some of our teams are 50 members or greater in size, and quite frankly, we think that's fantastic, because the key is to have as many diverse perspectives at the table as possible. We feel very strongly about the idea of vox populi, the wisdom of the crowds, and so we try to be as inclusive as possible.
Lisa, thank you very much indeed. And we've deliberately set these webinars up to be short, snappy, your 30-minute lunchtime break. So we are, very unfortunately, pretty much out of time. I'm just going to go back to Suzette and Lisa. I just wonder, is there one thing, I'll give you a bit of time to think, one thing which you've learned on this call? It could be from each other, it could be from the question, but one thing which might stick in the mind. Susan, Lisa, I'll come back to you in 1 second, but before that, Anna, do you want to just give us a run through of what's happening across the rest of the week?
Sure. So we have 4 more webinars coming up. Tomorrow's is No One in My Network Seems to Care. What should I do? And we have the fantastic Jocelyn Cornwall joining us for that. Wednesdays is the best way for a network to communicate. So we have Chris McCarthy from the Innovation Learning Network joining us for that. Then we have on Thursday, how to measure the success of network. And we have George Chilal from Cincinnati Children's and also Sam Jones of UK Models fame joining us for that one. And then finally, finishing up on Friday, we have Do Networks Have a Natural Life? And we have Becky Mulvey joining us, who's Professor of Health Systems Innovation, joining.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed.
Just to add to that, Suzette did mention about her blog, which will be available on the Kaleidoscope website shortly, and we'll be releasing material from all of our network faculty who you can now find out about on our website, kaleidoscope.healthcare. So keep your eye on that for any content coming out during the week, and we'll be advertising on Twitter as well for you to see.
Indeed, good point. Our network faculty, which includes the lovely Suzette and lovely Lisa, thank you very much indeed for joining and agreeing to help advise Kaleidoscope as we go through. So to finish, I wonder if we can go Suzette and Lisa, sort of one thing which might stick in the mind from the call today. Suzette.
So I think the one thing is that it's as important to help managing the people as it is as much managing the network.
Oh, very succinct. Thank you very much, Suzette. Lisa.
Suzette reminded us that it's incredibly important in these networks to remain humble and curious. Those are actually principles that we live by in the Armstrong Institute for Patient Safety and Quality at Johns Hopkins. Incredibly important to build trust and build the networks that will wind up being successful.
Excellent. Suzette, Lisa, thank you once again. Apologies for one slightly over. Thank you everyone for joining. Please do join us for the rest of the webinars this week. If you've got any particular network issues which you'd like to discuss with Kaleidoscope, please do get in touch. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you for joining us for Network Fest 1. We look forward to seeing you for the rest of the week. Thanks very much all.
Bye.